Happy Wednesday night and welcome to Deep in the Plus. This is a show where we go deep into the Disney Plus catalog and find a movie or a TV series to talk about. And tonight we are doing the great work. We're going to be talking about the Skeleton Crew, and we're going to talk about it with this crew, starting with Nick Cicero.
Hey, great to be here again.
Man, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And Desi.
Can't say I've ever heard of Noah Atten.
Oh, bright suns. Okay, so there's a new Star Wars show that dropped, and whenever we have a new Star Wars show that drops, we let all the episodes run, and then we talk about it. So if you guys have not seen The Skeleton Crew, you might want to put your pencils down and take a breath and take a beat. Come back and see us when you've actually watched it, because we're just going to talk about everything on this one. In the Star Wars universe, to start with, I have this chart that I did not put together but stole from the internet, and it kind of shows where this show falls into place here. It's a little bit kind of all over the place, but it shows, if you look down at the section that has Book of Boba Fett, stands out pretty well there. The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka. This is actually taking place during that same era, which is like the Mandalorian verse. This is the era after the Return of the Jedi. This is before Force Awakens. This is kind of the new sweet spot, and I've talked a lot about the universe jumps around back to the Acolyte or forward to or back a little bit to Obi-Wan Kenobi or Andor, and it's kind of all over the place. So I just want to make sure everybody knows where we are in the timeline. Although I'm not sure that it necessarily is important to know where we are in the timeline. Let me start with you, Nick. I feel like this one, more than most of the series that we have seen, really kind of stands alone.
Yeah, that's fair. If we're talking about obviously any of the movies or the other live action series, yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, it references a lot of things going on, so it has a lot of references in it that let you understand where it is on the timeline. Um, but you're right. You could watch this as a very standalone story, and I think that's why it was so enjoyable. I really do. I don't think it was weighed down by anything that plagued things like Kenobi or Ahsoka. I think, and this was just an enjoyable ride all the way through, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, Desi, I think we talked about this before with Star Wars, with Ahsoka. It felt like you had to have known all of the Rebels stuff, plus probably a little bit of Mandalorian. Do you agree? This one kind of is like you could just pick this up from the beginning.
Yes, in fact, I had a friend who had basically only seen the original trilogy and was like, "Do you think I would still get it if I watched this show? If I haven't watched any of the other shows?" And I was like, "Yes, you'll definitely get it. Basically, all you need to know is what a Jedi is, and then you're fine. Just it's a good space adventure. Um, Maybe if you knew about Alderaan, that might be just like a quick hit that was kind of a interesting fact. But really, I don't think that you need to watch basically anything. You probably don't even need to watch A New Hope if you kind of know what a Jedi is going into this.
So, like, hey Siri, what's a Jedi? And then you're done.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Nick, let me come back
I
to
think,
you on this. Go ahead.
well, I mean, I think that's the way it was written, right? This was written as a little standalone adventure, and they really nailed what they were going for. In all the press leading up to this show, they kept calling it Amblin like, right? And that's like E.T., Goonies, that kind of stuff. Those early '80s kid adventure type shows. And that's really all it was. And so just like you can watch any of those films without any kind of lore of that universe, that is exactly what this show is. And it nailed everything it was trying to accomplish.
Well, and honestly, I feel like Star Wars has gotten so big, almost to the point of overwhelming, that there's not really an entry point anymore. In general, if I pull up and I did, Disney Plus, and you look at Star Wars, like my mind when I was like a little kid and only had seen like the main movies would never have dreamed that there would be this much content in the Star Wars universe. Now, obviously, some of this is duplicated, but I mean, it is there between the behind the scenes, the animation, the shorts, the live action. There's just so much of it now that it is kind of hard to like find an entry point into it. But Nick, you think this is an entry point?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I call it entry point because I don't know if I don't know if it's a gateway to anything else, but it does give you a, I guess it does. I guess it does give you a taste of Star Wars because also the other thing I loved about this show is it didn't try to be a genre show that had Star Wars stuff in it. It tried to be Star Wars that also tried to be influenced by other types of genres, and that's why I think it succeeded. That's why I think it allowed itself to have its own story, so you could enjoy, if you really enjoyed this and being immersed in this universe. Yeah, I think you can get into some of the other Star Wars stuff, but buckle up because you're in for quite a lot of lore and journey. You're not just gonna, yes, you can sit back and enjoy a Star Wars, of course, but it might lead you down a path of, oh my gosh, now I gotta know this and this and this, and now I have to read this, and so be careful.
Well, you threw out a word that I wanted to talk about, genres, because when it comes to Marvel, I don't know if this is Kevin Feige who said this or somebody said, hey, so it's really interesting in the Marvel universe that like you have some shows that are sort of spy shows, and then you've got other ones like Ant-Man that's like a comedy, and that each of them kind of take place and have their own kind of twist to them so that it's something for everyone, whether you want like the espionage of Captain America Winter Soldier, or you want like an action adventure, or whatever you're looking for. I think it's sometimes hard to see a difference in the Marvel universe because they all kind of feel like Marvel movies, but I kind of get that. But here, what I was thinking as I was watching this, and I heard the whole thing about it's Goonies in space, or this is Goonies in Star Wars. What I was seeing was Mandalorian is cowboys in space. This is pirates in space. Would you agree with that or not really, Nick?
I mean,
When
yeah, of course it is. Sorry, Desi. Yeah, no,
no,
yeah, I definitely. Go ahead, Desi.
Well, the reason I went to Nick first is because Desi, I wanted to ask
Oh,
you is if that's the case, that Mandalorian was cowboys in space and the skeleton crew is pirates in space, then what was the acolyte? Porn in space? Is that what that was?
are you allowed to say that on YouTube?
Sure.
I mean, there are some spicy fanfics out there if anyone's into Oshimere. Um, no, I was gonna say that my dad asked me earlier, um, what I was doing tonight, and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna review Skeleton Crew," and he said, "Oh, I haven't seen that yet. What is it like?" And I said it was like, well, first I said Treasure Planet, and then I was like, no, he's not gonna know what I mean. And so I said Treasure Island. It's kind of like Treasure Island in space. Um, so that's exactly how I described it. I tried to say Goonies. He didn't know what I was talking about, so I went with Treasure Island. And he seemed to kind of get the concept, and then he was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not really into kid shows like Harry Potter." I'm like, "Oh, it was hard for me to explain to him that this, yeah, has kids in it, but I don't feel like it was necessarily just made for kids. Although my kids liked it."
Yeah. So one thing that I've always noticed, again, I'm 100 years old, so this is going to be different for me than other people. But when you would see something in the theater, it was theater quality. When you would watch something at home or on TV, you could tell the difference if you start looking
Right.
at animation and you look at the original Aladdin and that
Return to Jafar.
questionable Return of Jafar animation. It's you could tell the difference between that. I feel like just from a production value standpoint that those lines are so blurred anymore.
Hmm.
This could have been a theater release. I feel like the quality of the sets, the quality of the effects, the all of this feels like it is something that could have been in a theater, or it's just kind of a long. It could have been a long movie, but I do think this one does a good job of keeping things in episodes. If you've watched a lot of Disney Plus shows like I have, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier felt like a long movie, as opposed to this feels very episodic because we are going to different planets and different places with different problems and and different things like that. And again, I'm going to go back to Nick on this one. Do you feel like that you disagree with that in any way, or do you think like this is the high quality that we would have seen had it been in the original trilogies?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I wanted to bring up tonight, you mentioned it there. This one, what I loved about this one, and I don't think I've felt this way since like Mandalorian, early Mandalorian, where it felt episodic and it gave you that ending each episode that made sense, that felt right. Very like it felt like with Kenobi and Ahsoka, those shows, I felt like the ending was abrupt. They were just like, we got to cut it here because we need another episode. Like, and here I felt it just made sense. The running times went as short as long as they needed to tell that part of the story, and that was a chunk of story, and then it left you with a cliffhanger and moved on to something else. I really like that. And as far as the production value, man, the costumes second to none. I rewatched most of the series today, getting ready for tonight, and I was like, man, some of these aliens and stuff I didn't really notice because I was so engrossed in the story. And when I got to watch it a second time, I saw like how amazing all the creatures and costumes and things going on in the background were. I'm super impressed. And you're right, they brought you to all these different worlds, and I love that they can do that probably more cost effectively with the volume now. Where they could use that for production and just bring you to all these lands, and it probably doesn't cost them as much to get that done because of this wonderful technology that they're utilizing, which is fairly seamless. Every once in a while, I'm like, okay, yeah, that crash in the background doesn't look real. It looks like a screen in the background. But most of the time, that's really only on a second watch. Most of the time, I'm too engrossed in what's going on if they give me a good story. Now, I didn't feel that way with some of the other uh, recent live action stuff.
Gotcha. You talked about the aliens. It's interesting that I feel like the rodent, the Greedo types are there. That's usually the way they go when they're adding aliens to other
Yeah.
newer series, because it's like, oh, you know who Greedo is. We'll throw one of those in there. This felt like the land of the Hammerhead. Like they were all over the
There
place.
was a
But again,
lot of them.
it's bringing back a lot of like some familiar aliens like like we've seen, but also giving us new ones like you said. The I forget
Like
his
my
name.
boy
But
Neil.
well, yeah, but the werewolf dude. I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting
He's
that they
not
would.
new. He was in A New Hope.
Okay. Well, again, I feel like making him a big deal is new and
It's pretty
interesting.
cool.
He
Yeah.
was in the
No,
Cantina.
Well, speaking of the
yeah.
cantina, the guy who sits next to Neil at the bar here looks like, and I don't know if you can see in the background, but it looks like Walrus Man, sort of. No,
Yeah,
Ponda Baba,
it
is that
might
his
be.
name?
I mean, there's so much good stuff in there. I mean, that scene at that trading planet, whatever, the pirate trade port, whatever it was. I mean, that was there's so many good aliens in there. I was really taken back by that. It was like even the creature that was serving the food, the one that was like conversing with the kids at the bar there. I mean, it was just amazing. Lots of great creatures.
Yep. Before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge a super chat. Rosita's in the chat, and she says,
The
"Showing my love
Queen.
for Deep in the Plus, and love that my girl Desi is on, and Nick, and you too, Rob. Aw, thanks, Rosita. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
Who is she?
I
The trauma factor tonight?
I know, right? I did enjoy Skeleton Crew. Thanks a lot, Rosita. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for the super chat. One other thing about the aliens that I wanted to bring up is something that I noticed when the trailers first came out. Is I felt like there were Neil specifically, but there were a lot of nods between Neil and then the little like bird thing to. Didn't they feel like Captain EO a little bit? Like, did
I think they acknowledged that that bird thing was from Captain EO. Didn't
okay?
they say that?
For
Who's
sure.
they? Who's
Yep.
they?
Star Wars.
Star Wars said that?
Yeah.
I
Like
talked to
the
Yeah.
Star
Twitter.
Wars and they said this.
Or X, the platform
Okay.
formerly known as Twitter.
Dear Star Wars. um no, but I mean I think that's kind of cool. And we'll talk about your boy Neil in a second, but I first want to talk about some droids SM-33. How does SM-33 rank in the world? Again, let me go for let go Desi first to you. In your world of droids, like is he like did he go to number 1? Is he, how are you feeling about
He's I do love Smee, which I think is funny that they had the first mate be Smee. Um, I I like him. I would say he would probably be near K2SO for me. Um, you know, somewhere high middle, but not, you know, he's not at the R2D2 uh BB8 level, but he's pretty up there. He's
what about
higher than like a gonk droid.
That's not a,
I was gonna say how about versus SK?
Um, I don't know. I I love SK, but I did not interact a lot with SK because
Oh,
I
that's right,
was
because you were
first
for the
order
order. Yeah.
for the order.
Uh, yep.
Mhm.
Yep. All right, Nick. Same question. Droid wise, how are we feeling about it?
Yeah. I'm along the same lines as Desi. I will say that this droid is very similar to K2SO because uh, this droid kind of has uh, like nothing not K2SO. What's the droid from Solo? Can't think of the name.
L3.
L3. Thank you very much. L3, where I feel like they gave it deep feelings, like I I, I don't think it was all programming with Smee here. I think a lot of it was he actually developed a fondness for these kids, right? Obviously, like because towards the end there, he made a real decision to I think of go against programming side with the kids. Like when he was like, "Yeah, good enough. You're in charge again." And I think he developed an relationship with the kids that went far of the programming and the pirate code and everything. And that's very interesting to me how they're starting to do that with Star Wars droids. So I actually put L3 like above K2SO and in my kind of ranking hierarchy. And I think Smee is right up there. Like I think like yeah, tier two, not R2 and C3PO yet. You gotta be around a little bit longer to get that kind of, but second tier, yeah, for sure. I love them.
Uh, and how did we feel about? And again, this is sort of obviously spoilers and such. Is uh, when this happens.
No, oh,
Yeah,
that made
I
me
know,
so sad.
right? Sad.
But we've
I'm
seen C3PO without his head many times, so I really had a feeling he was coming back.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? This droid, like you kept like cheering for him because he kept standing up for the kids, and I think, like I said, at first I think it was the programming, but then I think you got a fondness for them, and by the end, yeah, you were totally cheering for him. to be around still. And I did have that feeling too, right? Because like KB had that connection with him, I think, because she repaired him, and um I just think they developed, yeah, like kind of a friendship, and it was great to see. But yeah, I was super sad. They did a great job, right? Like that's the thing with the writing for the show. Like they did such a great job to make me feel that much emotion for that droid. They did the same thing with K2SO, right? I mean, K2SO was getting shot at the end of Rogue One, when he was, allowing Cassian to, and or oh man, I'm
Jen
forgetting
Urso.
names today. Thank you, Jin Urso. To be the heroes, that was huge. That was super emotional, and it's amazing how they can make it emotional for droids.
How emotional did we get about this droid?
I
Yeah,
was so excited.
The bus
and they
driver. The
put gum
bus driver.
on the back of his head. I love
Do
it.
what?
When the kids were sticking gum on the back of his head, so like as a little, yeah,
Yeah.
I loved it.
I mean, yeah, there were some throws of things that
Well,
you look at, like the bicycles felt like speeder bikes, and the kind of Captain Rex droid driving the bus and things like that that made the world seem very familiar and got you pretty excited about it. But like we talked about at the top of the show, you didn't need to know those things. Your experience was enhanced if you were there and you knew that stuff. So let's talk about the kids. So we have these four kids. The basic gist of the movie is that these four kids, they end up meeting, they end up taking this ship that they shouldn't take. It takes them off onto adventures, and they find different places, ports of call, find the bad guy, bring him back to their planet. Life as they know it will never be the same again. So they've really kind of like shook the status quo. The great work is only kind of the mediocre work now because they've messed everything up. Um, so when you've got these four kids, I feel like you've got like Princess Leia in training, Lobot Junior, um, Star Lord wannabe, and then Neil. Does that sound about right? Or I don't
and
know.
then
I know that there's been a lot of affection for Neil Nation, and especially I
That's
feel
right.
like Desi, you have some particular love for Neil. Talk about why.
Oh, well, when I first saw the trailer, I was just instantly in love with him. I was like, oh, "Is that a baby Max Rebo?" But because Star Wars and I talk all the time,
Yeah, you and Star
Star
Wars, dear
Wars,
Star Wars.
yeah, that apparently not the same species as Max Rebo. I feel like they probably, you know, descended from some kind of species that they branched out in different directions. But just look at how cute he is. I would give all my credits for some Neil
Oh,
toys.
oh, okay. All your credits. I think that when I was watching all, there's some Max Rebo right there. Are you as enamored by Neil, Nick?
no, no. Uh, I I mean, you're asking us to put, like, rank poor kids, but like he was no, there was I didn't look. I loved all the kids, so there was nothing. I think they all did a fantastic job. I think he added to the comic relief. I think that was his character. I think he did a great job at that. I liked how each character had their own um, kind of personality, and they brought their own traits to the group, right? And I'm very glad that um, I don't know. I'm glad that they were all well written like that, and he wasn't just like kind of a toss off character. Because at first, at the very beginning, it was hard to relate to him because he was the only non human character, and so you got more emotion, and at least for me, I got more emotion and connection with the other characters, and we're more invested in them. So really, Neil was the hardest one for me to invest in, but then he kind of had his moment in the episode. I think it was like maybe the fourth episode where they found the planet that was like Aten, and
At
there was the
Akron.
tribal war at Akron. That was at Akron. Um, and so he kind of had his moment there, and then from there, kind of that kind of gave you foreshadowing on what he was going to end up being or doing. So I don't get the huge love other than, I mean, he's cute and adorable, but like other than
That's all
that,
I need.
I do
he
think it's
didn't
the
have didn't have personality the other characters did.
well. I got to tell you,
I have an affinity for cute, adorable characters.
Wim.
Go-
Wim was the, like I said, the Star Lord of this thing. And thinking back to that moment in Infinity War where Star Lord messes everything up, the whole plan they have for the Gauntlet, and it's just like, just dude, don't do that thing, and then he sends everything off into a tailspin. It's like, every time they tell him don't push the button, he pushes the button. So it's like, don't do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. Don't miss that. I'm going to miss it. Don't do this. I'm going to do it. So he's the one that's the catalyst that's moving it along. So I can't be mad at the actor kid, but the character is like, just really, really, dude. And the fact that they named him Whim, maybe, I mean,
What's
is
wrong
that
with
is that
Wim?
too on the nose because just on a whim he pushes a button and they go off into space? I don't know. It's interesting to look at the cast as they are without their accoutrements though, and the little
Right?
boy who plays Wim was the voice of Antonio in Encanto,
Was he?
and yeah,
Oh,
and the boy who plays Neil was in a movie like this past Christmas that was a Jack Black movie called Dear Santa, where he accidentally writes a letter to Satan because he has dyslexia, and so he writes a letter to Satan, and Satan shows up and tries to take his soul. And this kid's good. Like I really do think this kid is a good actor. So I think that I almost feel like they lost a little something with this kid based on what I saw with him in that movie by having him be Neil behind the mask, because it feels like it's more of like a puppetry choice as opposed to something that maybe CGI might have been a little bit more. I don't know. The girl with the visor, KB, does that give Lobot? Is that on purpose? Is that, I don't know,
sure.
Nick?
I,
Yeah.
You,
Yeah. Right. I think any of those characters are a Lobot character. I think they have these, this technology in this universe that people that need it can get this technology, right? Like, so I like how they didn't make a thing of it, right? They didn't like go into some story about why she necessarily has it, as far as I could tell. I think they reference it like a couple times. Obviously, there was that whole episode where she had to be, saved and kind of repaired, right? Which was pretty phenomenal. That episode was might be my favorite episode. That was a fantastic. I think that was like maybe episode 5, if not 6. Um, but that, she was a great character, and yeah, I think that was definitely a Lobot thing, and I think the owl Kim also had the Lobot thing going on, and that's why they communicate and had a connection there.
I think the kids in general did an amazing job, and I've gone back to the whole, like, is it Jake Lloyd's fault or is it George Lucas's fault that young Anakin was the way he was? I
adult
don't know.
Anakin was the way he was. I'm gonna throw that on George Lucas.
Okay, all right, there you go. So yeah, but I think that the kids, like acting wise, I think the kids in Star Wars movies recently or series have been great. I thought, Young Princess Leia we talked about a lot, was
She
really
was
good.
great.
So I think
Yeah.
these kids all do a great job, especially since so much, just like Goonies or any of the, like you said, Amblin movies, so much of this entire movie rides on their shoulders. Those scenes, like her needing to be rebooted, or like them being, facing facing Jod. It's just, I think they did an amazing job. Let's talk about Jude Law's character. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see him in his like sort of Kylo Renish with the helmet on phase. Like I feel like in, and Desi would disagree with me. I feel like
Romantic?
no, no, this looks pretty badass. Like him walking in like this. Like I'm like,
He
okay,
does.
let's just see him like this the rest of the movie. But then they immediately kind of like, you know, kick his seat out from underneath him because they don't find the credits they're looking for in the beginning. But I thought that was a really neat
Mhm.
entrance for him, and I would have liked to have seen him more like that because we meet him as Jod, and then we go back to that, and it doesn't mean as much to me anymore. Is that dumb?
Yes.
Nobody answers.
Uh,
It is dumb.
I, Jude Law was. I mean, the kids were amazing. But I mean, Jude Law was the bright spot that really made this show happen. The way he played that character as man, like the character arc that we got to see with him was phenomenal because watching this show and it being with a cast of four kids who are the stars of the show with Jude Law, you don't expect it to be that dark. Like you don't expect them to be that vicious or that evil. Like because he doesn't have the mask. And so I think him not having the mask actually allows us to be surprised at how evil and close to that line he got us, right? So Darth Vader, there's no line, right? Like Darth Vader, there's no surprise. You see Darth Vader on screen, you know he's a bad guy, you know he's gonna, do whatever he needs to do and to get his way. Whoever's in his path, sorry. With Jod, you could see the conflict in him. You could see the conflict. He did not want to hurt those kids. Like he was very evil and very ruthless, but he had his line, right? And the kids knew that. And that's what I really loved about their interaction together. And that has a lot to do with the directing. So you're asking about, the kid acting and things like that. Yes, the kids are bringing a lot to the table, but it's that those directors that are getting that out of them. And to get them to play right at that line with Jude Law and bring everything right up to and and towards the end there where it was like Fern was like I kind of know you're not gonna cross this line. Like you've showed me enough. Yeah, you're mean, you're bad, but in that treasure room, you drew your line. You could have hurt me. You could have just hurt us all and taken whatever you want at any point here, right? Because at a certain point, he had pretty much everything he needed and didn't need the kids anymore. He did not want to hurt those kids. And they kept using him to get where they needed. And he had that line. But you thought maybe he could cross the line, right? Like there were definitely times there where I was like, he could kill Wynn's father. Like this show could go that direction. He can hurt the mother, Fern's mother. I always thought that, and Jude Law played it. I mean, masterfully. Like one of my favorite all-time characters at this point because he was just so well written and so well acted.
I love the fact that no matter what situation he went into, he was always looking for snacks. Whether, when they landed on the planet, and when they landed on the first planet, the luxury planet, and he's like, yes, bring me your finest wine. And then when he lands on Atten, he's like, yes, and of course your finest snacks. And it's like, all right, yeah, sure, why not? I do think the director has something to do with it, and I just I brought that up a second ago that John Watts was it's kind of the creator and director of the first episode, but I feel like was probably the driving vision, even though they do just like they do in a bunch of these other Star Wars ones. They bring in Bryce Dallas Howard or other directors to direct each individual episode. I feel like this is John Watts' vision for this one, and I think that I've think at this point I'm a John Watts fan. I mean, I love the Spider-Man movies, like the Homecoming, No Way Home, and Far From Home. I think are all great. He did a movie called Wolves that had Brad Pitt and George Clooney in it that I thought was great. I have not watched The Old Man, but like I feel like I want to now, and it reminds me
That's
of
right.
more modern Joe Johnston, who did like The Rocketeer and was involved with Jurassic Park movies and like the Jumanji and that kind of stuff. So I feel like that John Watts has become that guy for me, and I would probably watch just about anything that he's done at this point because he did. I feel like I feel like he did a good job on this one. Does he? Any thoughts after all that rambling?
I I thought Jude Law did an amazing job. Part of the reason I like Kylo so much is because he's nuanced. It's not just like he's 100% evil. I think, a lot of times with Star Wars characters, you get this guy fully evil, this guy fully good. There is no in between, there is no gray area. And I like seeing characters that have a bit more depth to them. I also felt like Jude Law came in to Lucasfilm with a list of wants, and it was, I want to be a bad guy and wear a mask like Darth Vader, but I also want to be a Jedi and have a blue lightsaber, and I also want to be a pirate, and I just want to be really cool. So,
uh,
and
well,
Disney's like, sure, done.
do you
He got all the coolest
do
things
you
wrapped into one.
do you agree with me, Desi, though, that he had a line and was never going to actually hurt the kids, but always wanted to pretend he was this super bad guy
Yes,
that could?
that is, that is exactly how I felt about him. I felt like he, when, as a parent, it's like you you do your chores or you're not gonna get dinner tonight. You're gonna go to bed hungry. They're never gonna go to bed
And you hope your kid never calls you on it. Is that what you're saying?
hungry, right?
Like, yeah.
Yeah. So he's
Well,
like,
and
I don't want to hurt you. Just do what I'm asking. We can all win here. Was his? I think he was thinking that, right? He was thinking,
Yeah.
all I want is the money. Like, you can go about your life, pretend we were never here. Just give me all the money, like, and I'll go. It's like a bank robber who goes into a bank, not right, not intending to
I,
actually shoot up the place. So just give me the money and I'll go. That's it. I don't want
I
to hurt.
do feel like where he went wrong though was give me the money, but also I want to prove to all of my friends that I was right. So therefore, they have to come down and see it. I can't just
yes,
like go back up there.
it did make him seem
Well,
very
I think
needy.
so that's a good point. So and that was in the last episode, and so did he need that ship? That's part of what I didn't understand. Did he need
No,
that
I
ship
don't
to
think
come
he
down
did.
Well,
to
here's
get
why I
the
think
money?
but here's why I think he did. Here's why I think he wanted them to see him is because of how it opened. It opens with him going
Hmm.
into an empty
Oh,
vault and everyone laughing at him. Everyone is laughing at him in front of his face and going, "You said there were credits here. There's nothing here. You're a loser." And so I think in the end he has something to prove, and that's why he wants to bring those guys down. Part of it, obviously, once we kind of see a little bit more of his plan. Now he's decided that he likes it on Adatin. He wants to take over. He wants to be in charge. He wants to mine it
Be
and
the
continue to mine it
supervisor.
rather than just grab credits and run. He wants to continue to mine it and run it, and he can with his band of misfits here. But they're going to be more loyal to him now that
hmm.
once he proves to them it's there. So he can't just send credits back up. They'll never understand. That was my take on that. Is he had to prove it to them because he was wronged in the beginning. So
I like that. Okay. Yeah.
I love the Jedi aspect of this. They could have, to Desi's point, they could have made him a Jedi. He could have just said, "Here's on my bucket list." They could have made him a Jedi, but they made him Jedi adjacent, so that there's
Mhm.
still the fact that he's a bad guy here. He's not a Jedi gone bad, and he is not a Sith. Like he's not that bad. He is just a guy who learned some Jedi tricks. And I thought that was enough. I thought that was interesting.
I
Well, it's funny
loved
you
it
call.
because go ahead.
Go ahead, Nick, and then we'll go
Oh,
to Desi.
oh, yeah. Sorry, Desi. But can we all just agree? Like, he 100% could use the Force, right? It wasn't a trick. He wasn't using tricks.
Right.
Did
No,
we agree
agree.
with that?
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
there's still some people out who don't fully agree with that.
Oh,
I think people thought that until the last episode. They thought, "Oh, he's just doing the same
Okay.
thing that was it in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show where the guy from Eternals was like
Yeah.
using a magnet or whatever." Um,
Yeah.
but I think with the last episode, it proves, yeah, yes, I did learn some of the Force from an actual Jedi, so I don't think it was a trick at all. But I really enjoy the fact that he is not like Rey immediately. Like he, I like that there are levels of the Force, and it's
Mhm.
not just either you have it and you're amazing at it from birth, like Rey and Anakin, or you don't have and you're just like a normal Joe Schmo. I like that, he can kind of use the Force, but he's not great at it. I really thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of the reason why I ask is I just want to make sure because I know Fern, I don't believe Fern believed him up until the
Right.
very last few, because even when he was levitating the lightsaber in his hand, she turned to her mom and said, "He's it's a trick. He's tricking us." And but then as soon as I think the final thing that I think solidified it for me was when he first pushed Wynn's dad, right? Like everything else, you might be able to say he maybe did something, but I don't even understand the argument even leading up to the last episode because he couldn't pre-rig all this stuff. He couldn't pre-rig the key. The we saw the guards hang it up. He couldn't pre-rig some of the lighting and things like that, like the guy from Kenobi. So I don't understand why people actually even thought that he might be tricking everybody, but like I always believed he had the force the entire and could actually utilize the force throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
But
the only
it
thing I
made
can
the weird little rumbling sound, right? Like that. Come on, that means he's using the force. If you play the music and he's not actually using the force, that then everything's out the window.
That's the thing about this too is that I think that there was that seed of doubt that Fern had, like you said, Desi, from the beginning of like saying in the in the cell. Anyway, there's one where it could have been theater. Like there is, it could have been theater. He could have been in cahoots with any of those people because they didn't know any of those people. They couldn't trust them. But to your point, Nick, once they get down, to Ad-Atten, there's no way he can stage any of that stuff. So the stuff that he's doing, you've got to believe at that point that he has the power to do so. So I think we've talked about most of the main actors in this and how they did, except for we need to address the elephant in the room.
Neil.
Gunter, played
Did
by
I do
Jaleel
that?
White. Like, yeah, did I do that? Yeah, Gunter, played by Jaleel White. Here's the thing: is I kind of picked him out as like that Steve Urkel from the beginning. My wife didn't see it at first, and I guess it's because he
Oh,
had like the Terminator style thing going on with his eye. But I don't think he did an awful job, but I don't think he's gonna get an Oscar or I mean an Emmy for this one. Like if that makes sense. Um, but
He
the other
wasn't
thing,
memorable.
yeah, exactly. I think it was like you're using somebody who is notable in a Star Wars movie. Sometimes I feel like it's distracting. Sometimes, if especially if they're not like a main character. Obviously, Jod is a main character. We're following him along. We buy into him. We learn about him. But I thought that Gunter being like the I don't know. The other thing that was weird to me, and I can't put my finger on why this is, but I'm glad we've gathered together so that you guys can walk me through this, is that Wim's dad, Wendell, felt weird. Like, I don't know if it's like he wasn't, it's not that he's not necessarily a good actor or that he was acting like a bad dad. It just didn't feel right. I feel like I see you nodding, Nick. Do you agree with me? Like something felt very
mm.
like plastic almost about his performance maybe.
Yeah. If I had a nitpick, I'd say that felt like the weakest written character in the entire show. I think we were supposed to see an arc with him, which we did. We were supposed to see, oh, I'm this distracted dad. I'm doing the best I can as a single dad on this planet, and he's trying to raise his kid. They didn't have a lot of time to play with that and set it up. In the ideal world, potentially they would have expanded some of the scenes there and showed us a little bit more of the family life, and that could have endeared us more to the parents. But they really quickly remove the kids from the parents a little bit faster than I even thought they might do. I thought they might establish more home life before they did that. And I think that might have been part of the problem. He was not a bad actor. I think it was just a rush job trying to show us an arc there where he's this distracted dad because there's this great mysterious great work, and it did make me more intrigued about what the great work was and what was all going on there, because he obviously thought it was so important, and Wim's education was the most important thing in the world, that he had to get good placement and get a good job in here. I didn't realize how much Wim actually knew about the governmental structure of that until that episode where he had that kind of secret meeting with Fern's mom. That surprised me a little bit, that he had that level of access to her, who seemed higher up than him, I think, in the
I
hierarchy.
mean, he's a
Um,
level 7 systems coordinator.
oh, excuse me.
All right, so wait.
But yeah, I think, but then he became pretty heroic towards the end, which I think you just saw that character growth and that connection with his son. Oh, now I believe you. So it was rushed. In the ideal world, there would have been more time to develop that.
Yeah, and I looked on this guy's IMDb, and it does look like, I mean, he is an established actor. There was something weird about that character, and now that you say that maybe it just wasn't fleshed out enough, that could make sense. Maybe there were a lot of rewrites about it, and it was, that was rushed. I don't know, but it just felt out of. It was the one weak spot to me that felt so out of place that it stood out to me a little bit. Um, Desi, let me ask you this question. So, we have a fabulous history in Star Wars with the Trade Federation as the basis for a movie, which you always want to, introduce the kids to, like how trade federations work. In this one, we have the glory of learning about minting. Like, I wonder, like, did you watch this with your kids and did they go, like, what's a mint? What are they doing here? Like, this seemed like a very over the top thing, because also here's the second part of this question. They can mint as much money as they want. Nobody's come to get it, and on their planet they dole it out. It just seems like it's now worthless. But I don't know. Did you have to have a TED talk with your kids about how mints work?
No, no. Um, I think they, as long as you understand that it's
Alexa, turn on the lights in the bonus room.
Oh,
um
I did it wrong.
uh
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. You did, Desi.
I I
Sorry. Go
I
ahead.
think that part of the reason the dad seemed a little weird and robotic at the beginning was, at least in my opinion, when I was watching it, I thought it was kind of like they were all a bit robotic because they had all been brainwashed into doing the great work and
Mm.
how important the great work was. It felt like it was a cult. Like
But
that was the feeling that I got from the dad and Fern's mom and all of the parents, was that this is kind of like a cult on this planet.
yeah, but like Neil's mom wasn't like that, and she was also apparently on the same level.
I feel like I know even less about Neil's mom.
What about Neil's twin siblings? How about them? What did you? No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Adorable.
let me
Or
let me. All right, so make sure those toys come with Neil when you buy the action figure. Um,
in
here's here.
bathtub too, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
You got. He was always in.
yep,
Why?
yep. Neil in bathtub. I can't wait for Kinner to sponsor that one. All right, so let me throw this out there, because this is the thing. I feel like when I watch something, a lot of times I'm trying to think 3 steps ahead as to where it's going. And sometimes I feel like I get it so early that I think to myself, either it's kind of like an easy connections day, or it's like maybe I'm super smart. I don't know, but I'm trying to think 3 steps ahead as to where is this going. When you're watching like one of those like murder dramas, and there's an actor that you recognize from something else who plays one of the bystanders, you're like, well, that's the murderer, obviously, because you've introduced them here, and we know they're too good to just be a quick interview and move on. But at the same time, like sometimes I think I know where something's going. And in this particular case, there was something that I swear was going to be a big reveal. And I was talking it up to as my wife and I were watching this. I'm like, this is exactly. I've figured this out. I'm super smart here. I've figured out how this is going to play out. And here's where it is. And I want to ask you guys if this ever crossed your mind, or if I just am crazy. Because again, as from earlier, Nick doesn't have a problem telling me that I'm crazy. So when we were talking about the supervisor, we had never seen the supervisor. No one had really seen the supervisor. The supervisor was up in this tower, and at some point, I was 100% sure that this was Takranod, the famous pirate, the one that all the songs were written about going to Ad-Atten and all these other things, that he had found his way to Ad-Atten, crashed the ship, hidden it, somehow secretly moved up the ranks and become the supervisor and was in charge of this planet. So imagine my surprise when we get to the end and they're like, oh, you're going to meet the supervisor, and it's this big round robot. And it's not even like the Wizard of Oz where there's somebody standing behind, like moving the levers. It was just a robot. And
I really thought it was going to be a Wizard of Oz thing with somebody else there.
Yeah, Nick, and did you have a theory at any point? Did my thing never entered your mind?
No, I that was definitely a theory knocking around in the head. I think because it made sense, right? That he would have found the planet and did what Jod did and or wanted to do, and just lived there, and maybe he just did a better job of doing it. He didn't ruin the planet in the process. So it did enter my mind. I think that it was this weird mystery, and I'm glad they didn't actually over explain it. Glad it didn't have to connect to some bigger thing. It was just they went along, like, to Desi's point about them seeming brainwashed. I mean, I think they just lived this way generation after generation. They didn't know any other way. They were insulated from obviously the outside world, and they knew that they just needed to do certain things, and they had a good life, right? Like, why kind of rock the boat? And it takes a whim and a Fern that think differently and want to, especially Wim, who really wanted to explore, and kind of push the button and go a different direction. And those people don't come along that often, right? And the robots, the droids that are around kept everybody in check very, very tightly, right? You were afraid to go against them. And I think in a society where you just have it good, as long as you just and they weren't slaves in any way, right? They had it good. They seemed to have all the freedoms that they wanted. They just go off planet or communicate off planet. Okay. Um, but it seemed like a peaceful planet, right? Without war, as far as we know. And I think potentially that's what happened to the other planets. I don't know if we have time or if we're going to get into that, but I feel like there were these 9 planets, and this is the only one that actually really succeeded for a long enough period of time. The other ones either were found out and destroyed, or like degraded into civil war, where factions started popping up and fighting each other. And this one, for some reason, everybody just stayed in line generation after generation, and got to where they are. I don't know if you watched the uh, show Silo. It reminded me a little bit of that series. It's also a book series, and where generation after generation, and then there's stories of revolts against the system from earlier on, and you have these little mini uprisings and things like that. And there's a lot of different silos around the globe or around that area, and certain ones divulged into civil war and unrest, and some of them thrived and survived. And I feel that's kind of the same thing that happened here.
You're muted. But my theory was that
You're muted, but I'm taking over. Here we go. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I I really thought that the great work was bringing Palpatine back. I thought that that's
Oof.
why Atten
Nice.
was was like secluded from everywhere else, was because it was a secret planet that he had hidden away to make all this money to fund his cloning, his secret cloning program. That's what I thought that it was, and what the great work was going to be, and that the supervisor was going to be Snoke. I just think that like we have it programmed in our heads that everything in Star Wars connects to everything else. So I really thought that it was going to connect somehow, but I really enjoyed that this didn't necessarily connect and it was a standalone story.
What I was trying to say was that do we know what happened to the other planets? Because we know the one they landed on that they thought was at Aten and it wasn't. Do we know what happened to the other planets already? Because if not, I feel like that could be where this series goes. Now that the barrier has come down and they know that there's things out there and they're like kind of the veil has been dropped from their eyes, does that mean that they will try to go to these other places?
So I in my rewatched, I picked up on something Kim, the owl creature, said, and she specifically said they were destroyed, and there was just the one left. So
Like Alderaan?
take that. I forgot
But
that.
if
So she
she
might not destroyed. She might have used a different word, but like she said something that it was like, okay, everybody believes these are all now dead plants, and or they've been found out, and there's just this one left that's actually still hidden and not known about.
Yeah.
I forget
Um,
the exact phrase. I remembered exactly what she said, but she did talk to that.
Gotcha.
but she made it sound like all of the other planets had been destroyed except this one, but the one that they went to was at Akron, which makes me wonder if they weren't destroyed, they were just hidden, and everyone was told that they had been destroyed.
Maybe
Yeah, I mean,
from a
Aten
certain
was
point.
a myth to most people
Yeah.
because they were like, no, it's not a real place because it was had been so well hidden. So, yeah, maybe that she doesn't know the answer to all those things. You certainly could pull a curveball and go to those places and find out that there something else has happened to them. But it's interesting, Desi, you thought this was part of the bigger Palpatine plot because there was the line that said, we look forward to. What was the line? It was, we look forward to seeing how things work out for
We
you. I
will
forget
take
the.
great interest in
Yeah.
your uh, future, something like
Yeah.
that. It
Yep.
was this basically the same thing that
Yeah.
Palpatine had said to Anakin.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to your future with great interest. Let's just call it that. So yeah, the next question will be is like, does this go somewhere else? Like, is there going to be a season two? They certainly, to your point at the top of the show, Nick, they certainly, in each episode sort of wrapped it up, but at the end they wrapped it up. They solved the problem. They figured out. Although we don't really see Jod get taken away, so like what happened to him and was he able to get away, and then we don't really see like now that the Republic has come to find everybody, and come down to the planet, we don't really see like what happens with them at this point, but we do get to see this image, of the ship coming in, which I think is kind of amazing.
The one with General Leia on it.
Yeah, with there's the X-wings, and then here comes the ship.
Yes, I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna see Leia.
Yep. But then they end it.
Maybe
So I
with the
mean,
baby Ben.
but I mean, it's
That was me
definitely
just wishful thinking.
definitely has the vibes. So,
Yeah.
but they end it with them, kind of now being a part of things because it was almost like a bottle episode where they were separated by everybody because of the barrier, and now that the barrier is gone and everyone else has kind of been welcomed into the fray and the Republic is here now. They're connected. So I mean, like, let me just get thoughts from both of you, starting with Desi. Where do you think this goes? Assuming there is a season two, where does this go next?
I don't know if it's going to get a season two, to be honest, because um, I think that the viewership on this was even lower than the Acolyte, which was already canceled. Agatha all along, they already said, isn't going to get a second season. I don't think it's going to get a season two, if I'm being 100% honest. And if it doesn't, then I'm fine with that because I think that this was a good story that was wrapped up and it doesn't necessarily need a second season. If they had a second season, I'm not entirely sure what it would be other than, trying to figure out what the great work was. Is the great work just making money? Or, how do they integrate into the New Republic? But, like, how interesting could that be? Um, what are the odds that, Wim and his three friends are going to accidentally jettison off planet again? So, I don't know.
All right, Nick, same question.
Yeah, I don't want a season two. I don't think it needs a season. And I don't think it's logical, right? Because I think of the kids, right? They're gonna already age out of it by the time there's no talk of a season two. So by the time they even think about it, write it, um, get start filming it, these kids are going to age out of that, and so I don't mind. What I really want to see is I think they should totally reference it in the Mandoverse, right? So I think there should be some kind of reference of it. I think potentially in the Mando film, maybe they go investigate something, or in a different series. I think because you have all these interconnected series now, you can have these one-offs that have this inroad, right? It's connecting, and if you want to do something with it, go ahead, go reference it, go visit it. Maybe Jod shows up somewhere else, in a different series because he probably made it off the planet. They left that open. I'd love to see that. I'd also love to see potentially these characters the way Star Wars is now, you could reference these characters years from now, bring them back as an adult actor, and have Finn and or excuse me, Win and Fern and KB and Neil. You could actually bring them back as adults in a different series in a different universe. Because it's all like connected. So what are they doing now? I could see
Yeah.
that totally happen.
Okay. One other quick thing I wanted to point out is something that jumped out at me as I was watching the end credits. Score
Hmm.
by Mick Giacchino, which that name should sound familiar because of Michael, who is the musical genius behind The Incredibles and many other scores. This is his son. I thought that was kind of cool. That I mean, this is not the first thing he's done, but I like looked at that and went, wait, Mick, not Michael? What? Went back and looked at it. So we're used to seeing like John Williams like when it comes to the big machine of Star Wars, but it was interesting to see him in these credits. Um, before we go into final thoughts on this review, I did want to bring up one other thing. Is I was thinking, what's next? Obviously, Andor season 2 is next, but I found this old slide of shows. So obviously, there's going to be a Vision season 3. That's a thing. The Acolyte has been canceled. There is not going to be a second season. Rogue Squadron and Lando seem like they're and Rangers of the New Republic. All of those seem like they're kind of done, or at least like held up at this point. Um,
I thought Lando was going to be a movie.
well, I bet it, but we haven't heard like what when that's going to happen, and is it going to actually be a movie, or will it be a movie on Disney Plus, or will it be a movie in the theater? So I think it's one of those things where we're still waiting. Like that one's not dead. Neither is Rogue Squadron, but I feel like Rangers of the New Republic is probably dead. So I feel like we're kind of running at the end. We saw this was a slide they showed back in the day, and it was looking at it going, wait a minute, there's a ton of stuff coming. I feel like we've run dry here. Nick, thoughts?
Well, I think the um number one, I'm super excited for Andor season two. I think that's going to be phenomenal. Um, the we obviously have the Mandalorian and Grogu film to
True.
look forward to. Super excited there. I think that is fantastic, and that can tie things together. I know that what's the other one? I mean, I mean, outside of this universe, I get this immediate universe. The Ray film, I think, is still technically on the table. They keep really talking about that, and even Daisy keeps talking about that. So, I believe that's still on the way. I mean, I still keep hearing Ahsoka season 2 is pretty much happening, right? Like,
Yep,
so I
it's
don't know.
in development.
Again, they say things and change their mind, but as far as like what's next, I mean, it might. I don't know what series is next. Because not other than the Mandalorian film, I don't think anything's that I know of is really happening. So we're gonna have Andor, and that's it, right? Like I
Well,
don't
Andor
that,
and Visions. So Visions is slated for 2025, Vision season 3, and
yeah,
then Mandalorian and Grogu movie is May of 2026. Ahsoka season
2026.
2 is in development. Taika Waititi Star Wars movie in
Yeah,
development. I
yeah,
think he himself is like, when I get to it, I get to it. And
yeah.
then the Dawn of the Jedi movie is in development. There's but like looking at like Lando movie, status unknown. Rangers of the New Republic, presumed canceled.
Worried about
um,
yeah
so I don't know.
until they
I guess I want to know what's next. So, one other thing too before about the parks is that there was a run of like every Marvel series when it would debut. And of course, Desi, we've joked about this on Park Center. Always comes to California, never to Florida. But part of the reason, well, so the Marvel stuff would come like next day. It's like you'd see President Loki on TV, and the next day you could go visit him in the parks. Um, but the thing with Star Wars, we saw a little bit about like right after Ahsoka, but we really haven't seen that since happen. Like maybe like Neil show up in the park. I don't know. That would have been kind of cool. And we always said it was
That would
because of
be
the
cool.
Star Cruiser we couldn't have that in Florida. Well, guess what? It's not there anymore. Bring it.
Oh,
Like
pouring salt in my wound.
I'm just saying. Don't you think we should maybe like why not Jod?
Make it the world between worlds. Make it so that you can have all of the characters all of the time. That's what I think.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
Wait,
Jod, he's got the mask. Have him in his pirate mask and have him doing meet and
right?
greets.
I mean, there are yeah.
Neil might be
There's
harder.
No, no, I know exactly where Neil goes. Carousel of Progress, Uncle Orville's tub. Just take Uncle Orville out. There you go.
No,
Done.
no privacy at all. I love that. Before we get to final thoughts here, anything I missed, Nick? Anything did you want to talk about? We didn't talk about.
So I don't know if you had the screenshot. I feel like you would have shown it there, but at the very end, Wynn had his comic book, and you showed one of the pages in the credits with the composer's name on it. There was one screen, I think it was the very last one, that actually had the outline of all four kids there. And so I mean, I remember seeing it and not thinking much of it, but I've seen people kind of make a big deal of that. Like, was this just like kind of a story, a legend that now other kids are reading about in the comics? Oh, you do have it. There you go. Awesome. So, you know, it's very interesting to see that because I believe that's probably a shot of them on the ship as it's rising off of their planet. Um, so it led a lot of people to speculate, like, was that just for fun, or is that like to kind of tease us and make us think like other kids are now reading comics about these heroic kids?
Interesting. Okay. I had not heard that. Anything else you want to talk about, Desi, before we go to final?
Let's go.
Let's freaking go. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, give us a thumbs up so it helps people to find us. And big shout out to our Wigs members. We love our Wigs, the WDWNT Interglobe Society. Thank you guys for being part of the family. We appreciate you. Every Wednesday night we do this show, Deep in the Plus. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again. Last week we did Saving Mr. Banks. Next week we're doing the Mighty Ducks, and the weekend after that, which is sort of a Valentine's-ish kind of a thing. We're doing Beauty and the Beast, and we're going to talk about where Belle fits in the pantheon of princesses we hate. But if you have not watched Park Center from last week, Patrick had a very hot take on Ariel. So we also do Park Center on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. You can go back and watch last week's episode, or catch us live this Sunday night at 9 p.m. for another episode of Park Center. But now, we've talked about the movie, we've talked about the actors, the characters, the cast, the universe, but now it's time. Now is the best time, Nick. I need to know from you, and then Desi, would you recommend this series?
150%. This is my favorite Star Wars series, anything probably since Mando season 2, for sure. I'd rank this above anything, even Andor, and I loved Andor so much. But this one was just, there were some minor nitpicks, but it was pretty perfect. I mean, it was an absolutely wonderful script. It was amazing acting, great directing, great sets. The story made sense, right? You could just plop yourself down in this story. I looked forward to it every single time an episode came out. Whereas, like, for something like The Acolyte, even honestly, I'm wearing the shirt. I love Ahsoka. My dog's named Ahsoka. Maybe that's why I had a high standard. I liked Ahsoka, but I didn't love it. I didn't adore it. I didn't think it was great. I had a lot of things to pick off of that one. This one, I mean, I just sat back and enjoyed it, and that's what I want to do with a Star Wars product. Star Wars content. I want to sit back and just enjoy it, and that's what I was able to do with this. And it was so refreshing, so wonderful. And I love that it was so very Star Wars from the opening scene. From the it wasn't a crawl, but they put the explanation of what is setting you up for the universe on the screen, and then they panned down and there was a spaceship. It was Star Wars from the beginning. They didn't try to do something. They didn't try to reinvent anything. They were like, this is Star Wars, and we're going to tell a little bit of a different story than we normally try to tell in Star Wars. But we're going to put it in the Star Wars universe. And it was just delightful in every way. And anybody can watch this. And even if you have, like we said, if you have no knowledge of Star Wars, you can plop yourself in here. You're not weighed down by any baggage. If you enjoy what you see here, they're then go back and start watching the other Star Wars films. And I think you asked if it was a gateway. The more I think about it, um, I again, I'm torn about that. It doesn't have to be. It can be. You watch it and enjoy it. If you watch it and enjoy it, and that's all you want, it's all you need, right? Like you're not sitting on the edge of your seat, like being like, oh, I need the next thing to see what happens to these people. It's it. It's a standalone story, and it's fantastic.
Okay. So I feel like on a lot of Deep in the Pluses lately, I've been saying, well, I mean, kind of, I might recommend it if this. If you've seen Inside Out 1 and you loved it, then yes, you're probably going to like Inside Out 2. If you've seen WandaVision, then yeah, you might want to see Agatha all along. If you are this type of person, then you might like this show. If you're not that type of person, then you're not going to like this one. I don't care who you are. I recommend this show. You do not have to be the biggest Star Wars fan in the world. You don't have to love, every single piece of Star Wars content to be able to enjoy this show, which I think was the biggest problem with Ahsoka. Um, you don't have to know everybody's backstory. My dad asked me earlier, oh, am I going to know anybody from this show? And I said, no. And he's like, oh, okay, well, then I probably don't need to watch it. I'm like, no, but that's what makes the show great. The show is great because you don't know anybody, because this, more so than any other Star Wars TV show, honestly, has been storyline driven and character driven. Do I love Grogu more than life itself? Yes. Do I really know anything about his character? No, but I just love him because he's cute. Um, but these kids and Jod, like, you get to know them. It is storyline and character driven. And it's not like, okay, let's try to pigeonhole how is this going to fit into the larger story with the Star Wars universe. No, this is just itself one cohesive story that doesn't need to tie to anything else. And it was just so beautifully written. The kids were great. It was fun. It was emotional. Um, I loved everything about this show, and I think it's totally wizard.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say, echo all of the stuff that both of you guys said, but I remember reading some people saying that this was really kind of a kids' movie or a kids' show. I remember seeing in a Phantom Menace behind the scenes, George Lucas, I think, maybe talking about the fact that, the Phantom Menace was made for sort of that generation's kids. And so Star Wars kind of has that sort of family friendly sort of vibe to it anyway. I don't think that this one stands alone as something that would just be for kids. So I think that if you were holding back because you heard it was Goonies in space, I think you need to watch it, because I do think, you don't need to know the rest of the universe, but I think if you know anything about Star Wars, you appreciate the little things. I feel like, and I didn't screen grab this, but there's a scene when Wim and KB are following the crabs, and there is a what looks like C-3PO's leg upside down on one of the crabs, and I thought, is that C-3PO's leg? Because he's lost his leg. Is that what we're supposed to think? And of course, you wouldn't be thinking that if you'd never seen any of this stuff. So anyway,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you guys for everybody that's been in the chat tonight. If you want to leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts on it, what you think, and we would love to hear it. Otherwise, we hope to see you 9 p.m. Sunday for Park Center. Tomorrow night's going to be Nicholas Cicero on News Tonight. It's basically Nick's show. I feel like. Don't you guys feel like that's the Nick show?
Of
It's
course
yeah,
it is. Yeah.
obviously. Okay, well, so
But
tomorrow night, 9 p.m.
and hmm,
What?
what?
Oh, okay. And then join us 9 p.m. Sunday for Park Center, and back here for another Deep in the Plus next week. And thank you guys so much for being with us. We appreciate you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.